Final Fantasy XI is approaching its 20th year anniversary, and with that, Square Enix is putting out all the stops and releasing this We Are Vana'diel campaign, this website that goes back into the history of its development, a lot of unshared artwork, and interviews with people from the industry, as well as the game development of Final Fantasy XI itself. It's been awesome to watch it all happen. From that recently came an incredible image that we have to talk about. This is so cool. Let's get into it. First off, this is Not For Games. If it's your first time here, welcome. We talk a lot about Final Fantasy XI and other nostalgic throwback games and MMOs, as well as occasionally some new stuff. If you've been here before, welcome back. But if you haven't checked out these We Are Vana'diel interviews, they're all awesome. But this particular image that I'm going to load up is one of the earliest drawings of what would eventually become Vanadiel. So this image came from the second interview with Mr. Kato, and he was talking about the development of the early Final Fantasy XI and how he's referencing a lot of, the other works in the Final Fantasy series, as well as the Mana series that he worked in, and kind of came up with this. It almost reminds me of like he drew it like on a napkin, this initial image of what Vanadiel might look like. And apparently a lot of the cities' names were different. You can see up on the left, it was called Vandole. I kind of love that it was Vandole. But what's weird is how much is similar, but how much is so incredibly different. So let's kind of dive into this. Unfortunately, I don't read Japanese. My lessons haven't been getting that far that I could pick up all this kind of handwritten stuff, and it's all very, it's names. It's not like the word for apple over and over again, but it doesn't matter. We can glean a lot from the shape of various continents, as well as a couple things that we know came up in the future. So first thing to start off, obviously the whole Sandoria region, the Windurst continent over on the right looks relatively similar with what we've come to know and expect. Lots of mountains. We've got Windurst down on the far right, and then what would be the Suruta regions, Tarangi Canyon, the Kolshushu region. All of that looks like it could fit into this. And in fact, I pulled up the actual region map that we know to kind of compare. And this was, of course, before the Rise of Zilart, it was probably thought of in the coming future, but I guess this might be what would eventually become the Shimo Uplands and Lowlands. What's interesting, though, is a couple of things that stand out to me. One, everything kind of was rotated a little bit, which, isn't a big deal. That's all perspective. But is this bottom left thing supposed to be Kuzat's? Or is it supposed to be El Shimo and it just moved? Because it kind of almost looks like that might have been like a palm tree down there. But that could also be Oasis. But either way, Kuzat's, as well as, the Oshima Uplands and Lowlands, wasn't released till Zilart either, I don't think. So another interesting little, saw that coming from ahead. But the first thing that stands out to me is what I'm assuming is Juno in the center here. Unless it's not, unless this is Juno. I assumed it was Quiffam Island the same way that we get to it now. But there's only two entry points. The eastern continent, that's Rudabaruda. And by the way, I can never remember the names of these continents. If they have names, let me know. But I do not recall them. The Windurstian continent and the Bastok Sandoria continent. But at this point in its development, Sandoria didn't have a direct line, at least that differed from Bastok, to get to what I'm assuming is eventually the city of Juno here. They just sort of are one continent on the left, and they merge down towards the center. And I love that that approach to true imbalance, depending on where you start, and not everything is exactly the way that Final Fantasy XI kind of came out with the initial release. There was parity of zones for almost everything. The only distinction being that Windurst, well, I guess we just love Selbina and the dunes, but they had their own version of that with Bibiru Peninsula and Maura. We just, not many people party there, but you could have. So I guess there was that parity. But in any case, Bastok and Sandoria share that continent and everything that goes along with that, including the dunes, and Winders was off on its own. But at this stage in the thought process, it does look like Sandoria was kind of only off on its... It connected, I guess, I don't know if it does connect, but what we know of is, Bustine Glacier and Zarkabard. I wonder if there was a thought process that would maybe connect to like what is now the Lee Telor area with Sanctuary of Zeta and stuff. Although none of that looks like trees, and maybe that's what this is. Oh, it's so strange. I wish I could read what this said. But also, I'm curious about this like tunnel that almost looks like it's going from Gusterberg, maybe one of the mines, all the way up to Juno. Was that actually supposed to be like Bastok's way of getting there? Like Sandoria could go there by land, but Bastok couldn't get there because of the mountain ranges, so it had to take these tunnels. It's kind of an interesting thought. Also, I love this thing over here is very Final Fantasy XI rock outcroppings in the water. Like we see those all over the place. It literally looks like this little glimpse of like what 11 could be. But even over here, we didn't see floating rocks. I don't know if this is supposed to be sky or the Riverine site, or maybe it was like a mixture of both of how like he saw that coming to fruition. Although I don't think Kanto worked on Chains of Bermathia, but that doesn't mean that his ideas weren't continued to be used throughout development. So this maelstrom, I did try to translate this because I was so confused about this particular element out in the ocean. It sort of just kept trying to translate as like Baskor Sea, and then would freak out and try to say another word that didn't make any sense. So I don't know if this is just saying like, I don't know what Bastok was called at that point. In the interview, it does mention it. It wasn't Bastok. It was Sandoria was originally Sandrino. Winders was Wyndham. Oh, Bastok was Bastok. So maybe it just doesn't know how to translate this and just saying Bastok Sea, or it was called like the Baskor Sea. I don't know. Does that make any sense to anybody? I don't know what this island is. It looks like there's almost like a little house there on the island. I don't know if it's supposed to be Quiffum, because I kind of thought that this was supposed to be Quiffum. I don't know. Not all of these ideas obviously, necessarily came to fruition. Clearly much was changed in between this and this. I don't know what's supposed to be up here in the upper left, these like tiny islands. Crazy. But it's cool to see this kind of glimpse into the beginnings of Final Fantasy XI. Part of it almost hurts me. Like, I like to think of, and I do think of the development of games like Final Fantasy XI that impacted me so strongly as so deliberate, and every choice that was made was intentional and impactful. And that doesn't mean that it wasn't this thing that built upon previous decisions and ideas that came out. Like, obviously there were ideas, but I like to think that everything was almost like flawless. Like there was no point where they were ever like, I don't know, what do you think? One of the games that really does that for me is if you hear about the development process for Ocarina of Time, one of my absolutely all-time favorite games. It's like amazing that game came together at all. And you look at it and what happened and how it came out, and you're like, this game was flawless. How could there have ever been any doubts in its development process? And it was all over the place. So I kind of wonder how much of that, was during 11's development as well. And I think that's what these interviews are sort of trying to reveal. But seeing a picture like this is kind of like, it's just bizarre thinking that they're just like, I don't know, throw out some ideas on the on some paper and we'll see where we take them. It's crazy to think of 11 that way. But it is cool. So yeah, I mean, a lot obviously came from this. The whole kind of 3 continents, even though it's really, 2 continents with some smaller subcontinent things going on. But the 3 major sections of the Sandoria, Bastok, and Winders, that all maintained the central city with converging from all the different areas that you can start from. Those kind of elements clearly stuck around. But it is interesting to see, how much it changed as development. I would love to see what the next version of this was. Like, was there a next picture? Well, did it immediately become more like this as people started to take these beautiful design elements and incorporate kind of game design on top of that, where they're like, okay, this is a beautiful concept of like a world that you could live in and play in, but we need to incorporate some elements of game design that no matter where you start, you have a pretty similar experience. Like those kind of choices. I don't know. I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you think of this picture, what your favorite interview or media has been from the We Are Vana'diel website. I would love to hear your thoughts. We're getting close to the 20th anniversary. It's sometime in May, I believe. Everybody keeps telling me it's May. I kind of forget. But, I mean, it's coming up. Let me know what your hopes are for that anniversary. We're going to find out soon. Otherwise, guys, I'll see you guys on the next one. Appreciate you coming out. Peace out. Bye.
I thought I'd be all like nostalgic, but I'm just more deeply upset.
But I don't understand how or why. Like, what about?
It's a highly focused sadness. Like it's not because I'm not pulling those feelings in. They're just coming to me as I run through this.